The telegram had arrived on a Tuesday morning in September of 1882, and Caroline Winston read it 3 times before she allowed herself to believe what it said. Marriage arrangement accepted. Arrive Kingman, Arizona, October 15th. Florence Ashford. Caroline stood in the dusty main street of Kingman, her worn leather boots scuffing against the hardened earth as she watched the stagecoach lumber into view. At 23 years old, she had been running her late father's cattle ranch for 2 years now, ever since consumption had taken him in the winter of 1880. The ranch hands respected her well enough, but the neighboring ranchers made it clear that a woman alone was an oddity they could barely tolerate. She needed a wife to help manage the household, someone capable and experienced who could handle the isolation and harsh conditions of Arizona territory. The matchmaker in San Francisco had promised to find her someone suitable, someone who would not balk at the unconventional arrangement of marrying a woman who dressed in men's clothing and did men's work. No, that was not right. Caroline shook her head, realizing her thoughts had tangled themselves. She was not looking for a wife. She was looking for a husband, but she had written the advertisement herself, had she not? She had placed it in the San Francisco papers because the men in Kingman were either married, unsuitable, or had made it abundantly clear they wanted nothing to do with a woman who ran her own ranch and refused to simper or pretend to be helpless. Caroline took a breath and started again in her mind. She had inherited her father's ranch, the Circle W, which sprawled across 3,000 acres of high desert country south of Kingman. She was 23, capable and practical. She had placed an advertisement for a husband because she needed help with the ranch, and because the loneliness of the desert nights had begun to weigh on her more heavily than she cared to admit. She had been honest in her advertisement. She was looking for a working partner, someone who understood cattle and hard work, someone who would not expect a delicate flower but rather a woman who could ride all day and shoot straight when necessary. The stagecoach pulled to a stop in front of the Kingman Hotel, and Caroline felt her heart hammer against her ribs. The driver climbed down and opened the door, extending his hand to help the passenger step out. Caroline had expected a man in his 20s or 30s, someone weathered by work but still young enough to handle the demanding life of a rancher. What she had not expected was the man who emerged from the stagecoach. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. His face was tanned and lined in a way that suggested he had spent most of his life outdoors. Dark hair showed threads of silver at the temples, and his eyes were a striking pale blue that seemed to take in everything at once. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, and when he straightened and looked directly at Caroline, she felt something shift in her chest. He had to be in his late 30s, possibly even 40. A full 15 years older than her, if she was judging correctly. Caroline stepped forward, suddenly aware of how dusty her trousers were, how her shirt was rolled up at the sleeves showing her sun-browned forearms, how her hair was tied back in a simple braid rather than arranged in any fashionable style. "Floyd Ashford?" she asked, her voice coming out steadier than she felt. The man's eyes crinkled at the corners, and something that might have been amusement crossed his face. "That would be me," he said. His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or perhaps Oklahoma. "And you must be Caroline Winston." "I am," Caroline said. She had not expected to feel so wrong-footed, so uncertain. She had imagined someone closer to her own age, someone she could guide and work alongside as an equal partner. This man looked like he had forgotten more about ranching than she had yet learned. "I apologize. I expected someone younger." Floyd set down the 2 worn leather bags he had been carrying and looked at her with those steady blue eyes. "The matchmaker told me you were 23, he said. I wrote back that I was 38 and asked if that would be a problem. She said you had no age requirements listed." Caroline felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had not specified age because she had assumed any man answering a mail-order bride advertisement would be roughly her contemporary. "She never mentioned your age to me," Caroline admitted. There was a long moment of silence. Around them, Kingman went about its business. A freight wagon rumbled past. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Caroline could feel curious eyes on them from the hotel porch and from the general store across the way. News traveled fast in a small town, and everyone knew Caroline Winston was expecting a mail-order husband. Floyd's expression remained calm, almost neutral. "If the age difference is a problem, I can get back on that stage when it heads out tomorrow morning," he said. "I would not want to put you in an uncomfortable position." Caroline looked at him, really looked at him. Despite the lines around his eyes and the silver in his hair, he stood straight and strong. His hands, when he had set down his bags, had been scarred with the kind of marks that came from rope work and hard labor. This was not a soft man or a lazy one. And there was something in his eyes, a steadiness and a quiet competence, that made her feel like he would be someone she could rely on. "No," she heard herself say. "Actually, I think I prefer it." Floyd raised one eyebrow. "You prefer it?" Caroline squared her shoulders. "I like a man who knows himself," she said firmly. "Someone my age might still be figuring out who he is and what he wants. You have lived enough life to know your own mind." For the first time, Floyd smiled. It transformed his face, softening the weathered lines and making him look younger and more approachable. "That is a refreshing way to look at it," he said. "Most women would find the age difference off-putting." "I am not most women," Caroline said, and she meant it. "Come on. Let me show you the ranch. We can talk details on the way." Floyd picked up his bags and followed her to where her horse and a spare mount were tied outside the hotel. She had brought Thunder, her reliable bay gelding, and Copper, a steady chestnut mare that her father had favored. Floyd secured his bags behind Copper's saddle with practiced efficiency, and within minutes they were riding south out of Kingman. The Arizona desert stretched out around them in shades of brown and gold and dusty green. The September heat was still intense, though not as brutal as the summer months had been. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and blue against the endless sky. Caroline had grown up in this landscape and loved it with a fierce, protective love, but she knew it was not for everyone. "It is beautiful," Floyd said after they had ridden in silence for a few minutes. "Harsh, but beautiful. It takes a certain kind of person to appreciate it," Caroline said. "Some folks find it too empty, too unforgiving." "I grew up in West Texas," Floyd said. "This reminds me of home. Different plants, different mountains, but the same kind of country, the kind that does not suffer fools." Caroline glanced at him. He sat his horse well, moving easily with Copper's gait. "The matchmaker's letter said you had ranching experience." 20 years of it," Floyd confirmed. "I worked my father's ranch until he died 5 years ago. My older brother inherited it, and he made it clear there was no place for me there anymore. I have been working as a foreman on other people's ranches since then, saving money and looking for an opportunity to have a place of my own again." "And you think marrying a stranger is the way to get that opportunity?" Caroline asked. She tried to keep her tone neutral, but she needed to know his motivations. Floyd was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I am 38 years old, Miss Winston. I have worked hard my whole life, and I have saved what I could, but land prices being what they are, I would be an old man before I could afford to buy a ranch of my own. When I saw your advertisement, I saw a chance to have what I have always wanted, a partnership with someone who understands this life, a place to call home, and the opportunity to build something lasting. He paused. I will be honest with you. I am not looking for romance or grand passion. I am looking for a working partner and, if we are fortunate, a friendship built on mutual respect. If that aligns with what you want, then I think we might suit each other well. Caroline felt something loosen in her chest. That is exactly what I want, she said. I have run the Circle W for 2 years on my own, and I have proven I can do it. But it is hard work for one person, and the neighboring ranchers make things difficult because they do not think a woman should be running a ranch. With a husband, I would have more credibility in their eyes, and more importantly, I would have someone to share the burden with. Then we understand each other, Floyd said. They rode on, and Caroline found herself talking more freely than she had with anyone in months. She told him about her father, about how he had taught her everything he knew about cattle and horses and reading the land. She told him about the challenges of the past 2 years, about the spring when they had lost a dozen head to a mountain lion, about the summer drought that had forced her to drive the herd to higher pastures earlier than usual. Floyd listened, asking occasional questions that showed he understood the complexities of ranch management. In turn, he told her about Texas, about working cattle drives in his youth, about the lessons he had learned from his father and from his own mistakes. He spoke without boasting but also without false modesty, painting a picture of a man who knew his own capabilities and limitations. The Circle W came into view as they crested a low rise. The ranch house was a simple adobe structure that Caroline's father had built himself, with a deep porch that provided shade during the brutal summer months. The barn and corrals were well maintained, and beyond them, Caroline could see some of the herd grazing on the sparse desert grass. 3,000 acres, Caroline said. We run about 500 head of cattle right now, though we could support more if we had the manpower. Floyd studied the layout with an experienced eye. Good water, he asked. A spring-fed creek that runs year-round and 2 wells, Caroline confirmed. We have never had a water problem, even in drought years. They rode into the yard, and one of the ranch hands emerged from the barn. Tommy Chen was a young man whose parents had come from China to work on the railroad and who had drifted into ranch work when the railroad moved on. He was good with horses and worked hard, and Caroline trusted him more than any of the other hands. Tommy, this is Floyd Ashford, Caroline said. He is going to be my husband. Floyd, this is Tommy Chen, my head wrangler. Tommy's face showed surprise for just a moment before he schooled it into neutrality. Pleased to meet you, sir, he said, extending his hand. Floyd shook it firmly. Likewise, he said. Miss Winston tells me you are good with horses. I do my best, Tommy said. Caroline dismounted and gestured toward the house. Let me show you around, she said to Floyd. The house was small but well built, with thick adobe walls that kept it cool in summer and warm in winter. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a cast iron stove at the other. 2 bedrooms opened off the main room, along with a small storage area. I have been sleeping in the larger bedroom, Caroline said, feeling suddenly awkward. The smaller one has a bed as well. We can arrange things however you think best. Floyd set his bags down carefully. I think we should take some time to get to know each other before we make any permanent arrangements, he said. I will take the smaller room for now. When we are ready to make this marriage real in all ways, we can decide then. Caroline felt relief wash over her. She had been prepared to do her duty as a wife, but the idea of sharing a bed with a stranger had filled her with a dread she had tried to ignore. That seems sensible, she said. Now, Floyd said, What needs doing? I would like to get a feel for the place and make myself useful, Caroline smiled. There is always something that needs doing on a ranch. Over the next few days, Caroline watched Floyd settle into life at the Circle W. He rose before dawn and worked until well after dark, throwing himself into the ranch tasks with a competence that both impressed and relieved her. He could rope as well as any hand she had ever seen, could shoe a horse without fuss, could read the herd and spot potential problems before they became serious. He worked alongside the ranch hands without pulling rank, earning their respect through his actions rather than demanding it through his position as Caroline's intended husband. But it was the evenings that Caroline found herself treasuring most. After supper, when the work was done and the hands had retreated to the bunkhouse, Caroline and Floyd would sit on the porch and talk. They discussed ranch business, yes, but they also talked about other things. Floyd told her about the books he had read, about his mother who had been a schoolteacher and had insisted her sons learn to read and write properly. Caroline talked about her dreams for the ranch, about her plans to improve the herd and possibly branch into horse breeding. "You have a good head for this," Floyd said one evening about a week after his arrival. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. "Your father taught you well." "He taught me everything except how to deal with men like Vernon Drake," Caroline said with a sigh. "Drake?" Floyd asked. "He owns the ranch to the north of us," Caroline explained. "About 5,000 acres, twice what we have. He has been after me to sell to him ever since my father died. When I refused, he started making things difficult. His hands cut our fences sometimes, letting our cattle drift onto his land, and then he claims we owe him money for feeding them. He has tried to file water rights claims on the creek, even though our claim is older and better documented. Little things, but they add up." Floyd's expression hardened. "That kind of man needs to be dealt with firmly." "I have tried," Caroline said, "but he does not take me seriously because I am a woman. He thinks I will eventually give up and sell." "He will take me seriously," Floyd said quietly. There was no threat in his voice, just a statement of fact. The wedding took place 2 weeks after Floyd's arrival, in the small church in Kingman. It was a simple ceremony with just a handful of witnesses. Tommy Chen and 2 of the other ranch hands, the local blacksmith who was a friend of Caroline's father, and the hotel owner's wife who had known Caroline since she was a child. Caroline wore the best dress she owned, a simple blue cotton that had belonged to her mother. Floyd wore clean trousers and a white shirt, with a string tie that looked like it had seen better days. The Reverend spoke the traditional words, and Caroline found herself studying Floyd's face as she promised to love, honor, and cherish him. His expression was solemn, but when he took her hand to place the simple gold band on her finger, his touch was gentle. When it was his turn to say his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "You may kiss the bride," the Reverend said. Floyd leaned down and pressed a chaste kiss to Caroline's lips. It was brief and proper, but Caroline felt warmth bloom in her chest nonetheless. After the ceremony, they had a simple meal at the hotel with their small group of guests, and then they rode back to the Circle W as the sun began to set. They were married now, legally bound together, but Caroline felt the same awkwardness she had felt since Floyd's arrival. They were business partners, certainly, and they were becoming friends, but they were not yet truly husband and wife in the fullest sense. That night, Floyd retired to his small bedroom as usual, and Caroline lay alone in the larger bedroom, staring at the ceiling and wondering what she was supposed to do with the strange mix of feelings churning inside her. She had married for practical reasons, she reminded herself. This was exactly what she had wanted, so why did she feel a small, unexpected pang of disappointment? The confrontation with Vernon Drake came sooner than expected. 3 days after the wedding, Caroline and Floyd rode out to check on the northern section of the property, where their land bordered Drake's. They found what Caroline had feared: a section of fence cut, and about 20 head of their cattle grazing on Drake land. "This is the 3rd time this month," Caroline said, anger tightening her voice. "He waits until our cattle drift through, and then he claims we owe him grazing fees." Floyd sat still on his horse, studying the situation. "Ride back to the ranch and bring Tommy and the other hands," he said. "We are going to round up our cattle and bring them home, and then I am going to have a conversation with Mr. Drake." "He will not listen," Caroline warned. "He will listen," Floyd said, and there was something in his voice that made Caroline believe him. It took them most of the day to round up their cattle and repair the fence. By the time they finished, Vernon Drake had appeared, riding up with 3 of his hands. Drake was a big man in his 50s, with a florid face and an attitude of self-importance that set Caroline's teeth on edge. "Well, well," Drake said, his eyes sliding over Caroline with a dismissive glance before settling on Floyd. "I heard Caroline had gone and got herself a mail-order husband. You must be him." "Floyd Ashford," Floyd said calmly, "and you must be the neighbor who keeps cutting our fences." Drake's face reddened. "I do not cut your fences. Your cattle break through on their own because you do not maintain your property properly." "That is a lie," Caroline said hotly. "The cuts are clean, done with wire cutters. You calling me a liar, girl?" Drake said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. Floyd moved his horse forward, placing himself between Caroline and Drake. "She is calling you a liar," Floyd said, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel underneath. "And so am I. This fence was cut deliberately, and we both know it. Now, I am going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. This kind of thing stops now. If I find our fence cut again, if I find any of our cattle on your land, I will not be riding over to have a polite conversation. I will be filing charges with the territorial marshal and taking you to court, and if that does not work, I will find other ways to make my point clear. Do we understand each other?" Drake stared at Floyd, and for a moment Caroline thought he might do something foolish. But something in Floyd's eyes, in the way he sat his horse with complete confidence, made Drake think better of it. "You have got some nerve," Drake said, but his bluster had faded somewhat. "Coming in here and threatening me." "Not a threat," Floyd said. "A promise. We are done here." He turned his horse and gestured for Caroline to ride with him. As they headed back toward their own land, Caroline could feel Drake's eyes on their backs, but she kept her gaze forward. "That was impressive," she said quietly once they were out of earshot. "That was necessary," Floyd corrected. "Men like Drake only understand strength. You have to show them you will not be pushed around." "I tried to do that," Caroline said, feeling a flash of defensiveness. "I know you did," Floyd said, and his tone gentled. "But some men will not respect a woman no matter how strong she is. It is not right and it is not fair, but it is the way things are. Now that you have a husband backing you up, Drake will think twice before causing more trouble." "I hate that it works that way," Caroline said. "So do I," Floyd said. "But we work with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be." True to Floyd's prediction, the trouble from Drake stopped. The fences remained intact, and the cattle stayed where they belonged. The other ranchers in the area, who had treated Caroline with a mixture of condescension and dismissiveness, began to treat her with more respect now that she had a husband. It rankled Caroline that Floyd's presence made such a difference, but she could not deny the practical benefits. As October gave way to November, the relationship between Caroline and Floyd deepened in ways that surprised them both. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's needs and movements. Floyd had a way of making suggestions without being condescending, and Caroline found herself valuing his input more and more. In the evenings, their conversations ranged from ranch business to philosophy to memories of their childhoods. "Why did you never marry before?" Caroline asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out. It was a question that had been on her mind for weeks. Floyd was quiet for a long moment. "I was engaged once," he said finally, "when I was 25. Her name was Margaret, and she was the daughter of a neighboring rancher. We had known each other since we were children, and everyone assumed we would marry eventually." He paused, and Caroline waited. "About 2 months before the wedding, she ran off with a salesman from Houston. Left me a note saying she was sorry, but she could not face a lifetime on a ranch. She wanted excitement, city life, nice things." "I am sorry," Caroline said softly. Floyd shrugged. "It was a long time ago. At the time I was heartbroken, but looking back, I can see we were not well suited. She wanted things I could never give her, and I wanted a life she found boring. After that, I focused on the ranch and on helping my father. By the time I was ready to think about marriage again, I was in my 30s, and most of the available women were much younger. It seemed like the age difference would always be a problem." "Until you met me," Caroline said. "Until I met you," Floyd agreed. He turned to look at her, and in the starlight his eyes were dark and serious. "You do not mind that I am so much older than you?" "No," Caroline said, and she realized it was true. "At first I was surprised, but now I think it is better this way. You are not trying to prove anything or make yourself into something you are not. You know who you are, and I find that attractive." The word attractive hung in the air between them. It was the first time either of them had acknowledged any kind of physical or romantic interest, and Caroline felt her heart begin to beat faster. "Caroline," Floyd said slowly, "this marriage, it was meant to be a practical arrangement. But I find myself caring about you more than I expected to, more than I thought I would." "I feel the same way," Caroline admitted. "I did not expect to, but I do." Floyd reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. "We do not have to rush anything," he said. "But I want you to know that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would like this to be a real marriage in every way." Caroline looked at their joined hands, then up at Floyd's face. In the weeks since he had arrived, she had come to admire his strength, his competence, his quiet confidence. But more than that, she had come to appreciate his kindness, his sense of humor, the way he listened when she spoke and truly heard what she was saying. She had expected a business partner and had found so much more. "I think I am ready now," she said quietly. Floyd's eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Caroline said. "You are my husband, Floyd, and I think I am falling in love with you." Floyd's expression softened into something tender and wondering. "I know I am falling in love with you," he said. He stood, still holding her hand, and drew her to her feet. "Come on," he said gently. They went inside together, and for the first time since Floyd had arrived, Caroline led him into the larger bedroom. They were tentative with each other at first, uncertain and a little awkward, but there was tenderness in every touch and genuine affection in every kiss. Floyd was patient and gentle, and Caroline felt safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. When they finally came together as husband and wife in truth, it felt like coming home. Afterwards, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Floyd pressed a kiss to Caroline's forehead. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Caroline asked. "For taking a chance on a man 15 years older than you," Floyd said. "For seeing past the gray hair and the age lines to the person underneath." Caroline propped herself up on one elbow and looked down at him. "I like the gray hair," she said. "And the age lines mean you have lived and learned and grown. You are the man you are because of all those years, and that is exactly the man I want." Floyd pulled her down for another kiss, and Caroline felt happiness bloom warm and bright in her chest. The winter of 1882 was mild by Arizona standards, with cool nights and pleasant days. Caroline and Floyd fell into an easy rhythm, working the ranch by day and falling into each other's arms by night. The ranch hands had quickly adjusted to having Floyd around, and the Circle W ran more smoothly than it had in years. With two people managing things instead of one, they were able to take on projects that Caroline had been forced to put off. They repaired the roof on the barn, built a new chicken coop, and started planning for expanding the herd in the spring. In January, they made a trip to Kingman to pick up supplies, and Caroline noticed the way the townspeople reacted to them. Where before she had often been met with skepticism or condescension, now she was greeted with respect. It still annoyed her that having a husband made such a difference, but Floyd had been right. They had to work with the world as it was, not as they wished it to be. They were loading supplies into the wagon when a woman's voice called out, "Caroline Winston, is that really you?" Caroline turned to see Sarah Mitchell, who had been her closest friend growing up. Sarah had married a shopkeeper 5 years ago and had moved to Kingman, and Caroline had not seen her in months. "Sarah," Caroline said, genuinely pleased, "it is good to see you." Sarah hurried over, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I heard you got married. You must introduce me to your husband." "Floyd, this is Sarah Mitchell, an old friend," Caroline said. "Sarah, my husband, Floyd Ashford." Floyd tipped his hat politely. "Pleased to meet you, madam." Sarah's eyes went wide as she took in Floyd's age, but to her credit, she recovered quickly. "Likewise," she said. Then, to Caroline, "You must come to dinner tomorrow evening. I want to hear everything." Caroline glanced at Floyd, who nodded. "We would be delighted," Caroline said. The next evening they rode into Kingman and made their way to the Mitchells' home, a neat house on the edge of town. Sarah's husband, Thomas, was a pleasant man who owned the general store, and he and Floyd fell into an easy conversation about business and ranching while Sarah pulled Caroline aside. "He is much older than you," Sarah said in a low voice once they were alone in the kitchen. 15 years, Caroline confirmed. "Is that a problem?" "Of course not," Sarah said quickly. "I am just surprised. I always thought you would marry someone young and dashing." Caroline thought about how to explain. "Floyd is dashing in his own way," she said. "He is capable and strong and kind. And he knows himself. He is not trying to prove anything or figure out who he is. There is something very attractive about that kind of confidence." Sarah studied her friend's face. "You really love him," she said, sounding surprised. "I do," Caroline said, and saying it out loud made it even more real. "I did not expect to, but I do." Sarah smiled and squeezed Caroline's hand. "Then I am happy for you," she said. "You deserve happiness." The dinner was pleasant, and as they rode home under the stars, Caroline felt a deep sense of contentment. She had a husband she loved, a ranch that was thriving, good friends, and a future that looked bright. "That was nice," Floyd said as they rode. "Your friend seems like a good person." "She is," Caroline agreed. "I am glad we went." Floyd reached over and took her hand. They rode the rest of the way home like that, hand in hand under the vast Arizona sky. Spring came early in 1883, and with it came the work of calving season. Caroline and Floyd spent long days and nights checking on the herd, helping with difficult births, and making sure the new calves were healthy and strong. It was exhausting work, but there was satisfaction in seeing the herd grow and thrive. One evening in late March, as they were riding back from checking the northern pastures, they spotted a lone calf separated from the herd. It was bawling pitifully, and there was no sign of its mother. "Looks like we have an orphan," Floyd said. They managed to catch the calf and bring it back to the barn. After a thorough search the next day, they confirmed that the mother had died, probably from complications during birth. Caroline set about bottle feeding the calf, and it quickly became a ranch pet, following her around whenever she was near the barn. "You are going to make that calf completely useless as a beef animal," Floyd teased one evening as he watched Caroline scratch behind the calf's ears. "Maybe we will keep her as a breeding cow," Caroline said. "She will remember that we saved her life and will be grateful." "Cattle do not work that way," Floyd said, but he was smiling. In May, Caroline began to feel unwell. At first, she thought it was just the stress of the busy season, but when the nausea continued for more than a week, she began to suspect something else. She waited another week to be sure, and then she told Floyd one evening after supper. "I think I am pregnant," she said, her voice a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Floyd's eyes went wide. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor," Caroline said. "I have missed my monthly courses twice now, and I feel sick most mornings." Floyd stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped over, and then he was pulling Caroline into his arms, holding her tight. "That is wonderful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That is the most wonderful news." Caroline wrapped her arms around him and let herself relax into his embrace. She had been a little worried about how he would react, but she should have known better. Floyd wanted this life, wanted a family and a future as much as she did. They rode into Kingman the next week to see the doctor, who confirmed what Caroline already knew. She was about 2 months along, which meant the baby would come sometime in late December or early January. "You will need to take it easier as the pregnancy progresses," the doctor warned. "No heavy lifting, no long days in the saddle." Caroline nodded, though she knew that actually following that advice would be challenging on a working ranch. But Floyd was there, and with his help and the ranch hands, they would manage. The summer of 1883 was one of the hottest Caroline could remember. The heat was brutal, and as her pregnancy progressed, Caroline found it increasingly difficult to do the work she was used to doing. Floyd was protective without being overbearing, taking on more of the physical tasks while still consulting Caroline on all decisions. She managed the ranch from the porch or the house, keeping track of supplies and schedules while Floyd and the hands did the heavy work. Despite the heat and the discomfort of pregnancy, Caroline had never been happier. She loved watching Floyd work, loved the way he was always gentle with her, loved the way his hand would drift to her growing belly whenever they sat together in the evenings. "What do you want?" Floyd asked one night in August as they sat on the porch trying to catch any hint of a breeze. "A boy or a girl, I do not care," Caroline said honestly, "as long as the baby is healthy." "I feel the same way," Floyd said, "though I will admit the idea of a little girl with your stubbornness and determination makes me smile." "Or a little boy with your steady temperament and patience," Caroline countered. Floyd laughed and kissed her temple. "Either way, we are blessed." In September, Vernon Drake made one more attempt to cause trouble. He filed a claim with the Territorial Land Office, arguing that the spring that fed the creek on Caroline's property actually originated on his land, and therefore he had primary water rights. Floyd rode into Kingman to deal with the matter, bringing with him the original land grant documents and survey maps that Caroline's father had carefully preserved. He spent an entire day at the land office, going through the documentation with the clerk and making the case that the Circle W. Tikes water rights were clear and uncontestable. When he returned home that evening, he found Caroline anxiously waiting on the porch despite the heat. "It is handled," Floyd said, swinging down from his horse. The land office clerk agreed that our claim is solid and predates Drake's by 15 years. He filed a formal rejection of Drake's claim, and he warned Drake that any further frivolous claims would result in fines. Caroline felt relief wash over her. "Thank goodness," she said. "I was worried." "You should not worry," Floyd said, coming to sit beside her. "That is my job now. You just focus on staying healthy and growing our baby." As her due date approached, Caroline found herself growing increasingly nervous. She had helped with plenty of animal births, but human childbirth was a different matter entirely. Floyd seemed to sense her anxiety and did his best to reassure her. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," he said one evening in early December. "You are strong and healthy, you will be fine." "But what if something goes wrong?" Caroline asked. "My mother died giving birth to me." Floyd's expression grew serious. "I know," he said gently. "But that does not mean the same thing will happen to you. We will have the doctor here, and we will make sure you have everything you need." The baby came on a cold January night in 1884. Caroline's labor started just after supper, and Floyd sent Tommy racing into Kingman to fetch the doctor while he stayed with Caroline, holding her hand and doing his best to keep her calm. The doctor arrived 2 hours later, and what followed was the longest night of Caroline's life. The pain was intense, and there were moments when she was sure she could not endure another contraction. But Floyd was there, steady and calm, encouraging her and telling her she was doing well. Just before dawn, their son was born. He came into the world screaming lustily, and when the doctor placed him in Caroline's arms, she felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "He is perfect," she whispered, studying the tiny face, the dark hair, the impossibly small fingers. Floyd was staring at the baby with an expression of wonder. "He is beautiful," he said. "You are beautiful. You did so well, Caroline." They named him Charles Winston Ashford after Caroline's father. Charlie, as they immediately began calling him, was a good baby who ate well and slept reasonably well. Though Caroline quickly discovered that motherhood was even more exhausting than running a ranch, Floyd was a devoted father from the very beginning. He would wake in the night when Charlie cried, changing him and bringing him to Caroline to nurse. He would walk the floor with the baby when Charlie was fussy, singing old cowboy songs in his deep voice until the baby settled. Watching Floyd with their son, Caroline fell even more deeply in love with him. The first year of Charlie's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and busy days. The ranch continued to thrive, and with Floyd managing most of the day-to-day operations, Caroline was able to focus on caring for Charlie while still keeping track of the business side of things. Vernon Drake seemed to have finally given up on causing trouble. They heard through the grapevine that he had lost a significant portion of his herd to disease and was struggling financially. Caroline could not quite bring herself to feel sorry for him, but she was glad that he was no longer a problem. In the spring of 1885, when Charlie was a little over a year old, Caroline discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was met with calm happiness rather than nervous excitement. They knew what to expect now, and they were ready. Their second son, Samuel, was born in December of 1885. He was quieter than Charlie had been, with Floyd's blue eyes and a thoughtful expression even as a newborn. "2 boys," Floyd said, holding Samuel while Charlie played at his feet. "We are outnumbered." "We could always try for a girl," Caroline said with a smile. Floyd looked at her with such love that it took her breath away. "We could," he said, "or we could be content with what we have. 2 healthy sons, a thriving ranch, and each other. That seems like more than enough blessing for one lifetime." Caroline thought about it and realized he was right. They had built something wonderful together, something that went far beyond the practical partnership they had originally envisioned. They had built a family, a home, a life full of love and meaning, but as it turned out, their family was not quite complete. In 1887, when Charlie was 3 and Samuel was 2, Caroline gave birth to a daughter. They named her Frances after Caroline's mother, and she was the image of Caroline with dark hair and brown eyes. "Now we really are outnumbered," Floyd said, but he was grinning as he said it. He doted on Frances shamelessly, and Caroline often teased him about being wrapped around their daughter's tiny finger. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch continued to prosper, and as the children grew, they began to help with age-appropriate tasks. Charlie, serious and responsible even as a young child, took to ranching like he had been born to it. Samuel was more interested in the horses than the cattle, spending hours watching Tommy work with the animals. Frances, when she was old enough, proved to have a natural talent for keeping the ranch books organized. In 1890, when Floyd was 48 and Caroline was 33, they sat on the porch one evening watching their children play in the yard. Charlie was teaching Samuel how to throw a rope, while Frances was trying to coax one of the barn cats out from under the porch. "You ever regret it?" Caroline asked. Answering my advertisement, Floyd turned to look at her, and his expression was tender. "Not for a single moment," he said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Caroline. You and our children and this life we have built together." "I was so surprised when you stepped off that stage," Caroline said. "You were 15 years older than I expected, and I thought for a moment that it would not work." "And then you said you liked a man who knows himself," Floyd reminded her. "That was when I knew we might have a chance." "We had more than a chance," Caroline said. "We had everything." Floyd reached for her hand, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the Arizona desert they both loved. In 1895, Charlie was 11 and already talking about taking over the ranch someday. Samuel was 9 and had announced his intention to become the best horse trainer in Arizona territory. Frances was 7 and had informed her parents that she was going to run the ranch business side when she grew up, because someone had to make sure the men did not spend all their money on foolish things. "She is not wrong," Floyd said when Frances made this announcement at dinner one night. Caroline laughed. "She gets that from you," she said. "That practical streak." "She gets it from both of us," Floyd corrected. As the century drew to a close, the Circle W was one of the most successful ranches in the region. They had expanded their holdings to over 4,000 acres, and their herd numbered nearly 800 head. They had also begun breeding horses, with Samuel taking the lead on that venture despite his young age. Vernon Drake had finally sold his struggling ranch in 1893 and moved to California. The new owner, a man named Robert Foster, was pleasant and professional, and the two ranches coexisted peacefully. In 1900, Floyd turned 58 and Caroline turned 41. Their children were growing into capable young adults. Charlie was 17 and already taking on significant responsibility for managing the cattle operation. Samuel was 15 and had developed a reputation for his skill with horses. Frances was 13 and kept the ranch accounts with a precision that impressed even the bank manager in Kingman. "We have done well," Floyd said one evening as they sat on the porch, a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage. "Better than I ever dreamed when I answered that advertisement." "You took a chance on a young woman who needed help," Caroline said. "I will always be grateful for that." "I took a chance on a remarkable woman who knew exactly what she wanted and was not afraid to go after it," Floyd corrected. "And she took a chance on a man 15 years her senior who had nothing to offer but hard work and a willing heart." Caroline leaned her head on Floyd's shoulder. "You had so much more to offer than that," she said. "You had wisdom and patience and kindness. You had the strength to let me be who I am and the courage to stand beside me instead of trying to stand in front of me." "We made a good team," Floyd said. "We made a great team," Caroline corrected. In 1902, Charlie married a young woman named Elizabeth, who was the daughter of a rancher from the neighboring county. The wedding was held at the Circle W, with half the territory in attendance. Caroline watched her son stand tall and proud beside his bride, and she felt a rush of pride and nostalgia. "Our baby is all grown up," she said to Floyd as they danced at the reception. "He is a good man," Floyd said. "We raised him well." "We did," Caroline agreed. Charlie and Elizabeth built a house on the far side of the Circle W property, and Charlie took over more and more of the daily ranch operations. Floyd, now 60, was still strong and capable but was happy to begin stepping back and letting the younger generation take the lead. In 1904, Samuel left for a year to work with a famous horse trainer in California. He returned with new techniques and ideas, and the Circle W Tekes horse breeding operation expanded significantly. Frances, at 18, announced that she was going to attend a women's college in the East to study business. Floyd and Caroline were supportive, though Caroline worried about her daughter being so far from home. "She is like you," Floyd said. "Strong and independent and capable. She will be fine." And she was. Frances excelled at her studies and returned to Arizona in 1908 with a degree and a head full of ideas for modernizing the ranch's business practices. In 1910, Floyd and Caroline celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary. Floyd was now 68, and Caroline was 51. They were both graying and showing the marks of a lifetime of hard work, but they were healthy and happy. 28 years, Caroline marveled as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. "It feels like yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach, and it feels like a lifetime ago all at once. I remember thinking you were the most capable person I had ever met," Floyd said. "And then I got to know you and discovered you were also the kindest and the bravest and the most beautiful. Even with the gray hair and the wrinkles," Caroline teased. "Especially with the gray hair and the wrinkles," Floyd said. "They are proof of the life we have lived together, the challenges we have overcome, the joys we have shared." Caroline kissed him, a long, slow kiss that held all the love and gratitude and affection of nearly 3 decades together. In 1912, Charlie and Elizabeth had their first child, a son they named Floyd Charles. Caroline and Floyd were now grandparents, and they embraced the role with joy. Little Floyd was a bright, energetic child who loved following his grandfather around the ranch. "He reminds me of Charlie at that age," Caroline said one afternoon, watching Floyd patiently teach his grandson how to hold a rope. "He reminds me of you," Floyd said. "Stubborn and determined and full of questions." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Samuel married in 1914 to a woman who shared his love of horses. Frances married in 1916 to a lawyer from Kingman who was smart enough to appreciate his wife's business acumen. More grandchildren arrived, filling the Circle W with laughter and energy. In 1920, Floyd turned 78 and Caroline turned 61. They had both slowed down considerably, but they were still active and engaged with the ranch. Charlie now ran the day-to-day operations, but Floyd and Caroline were still consulted on major decisions, and their experience and wisdom were valued. One evening in the spring of 1921, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Floyd took Caroline's hand. "I have been thinking," he said. About that day when I stepped off the stagecoach in Kingman. I was 38 years old, and I thought my life was half over. I thought I had missed my chance at having a family and a home of my own. And instead you found all of that and more, Caroline said. I found everything, Floyd said. I found you, and you gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You took a chance on a man 15 years older than you, and you never once made me feel like the age difference mattered. It never did matter, Caroline said. Not in any way that counted. You were exactly the man I needed, exactly the partner I wanted, exactly the husband I could love with my whole heart. Floyd pulled her close, and they sat together as the Arizona sky blazed with color. They had built a life together on this harsh, beautiful land. They had raised children and built a thriving ranch. They had weathered droughts and storms, both literal and figurative. They had grown old together, and through it all, their love had only deepened and strengthened. I love you, Floyd said. I have loved you from the moment you said you liked a man who knows himself. I love you too, Caroline said. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. They sat together in the gathering darkness, two people who had taken a chance on each other and had found everything they had ever wanted. The Circle W would continue long after they were gone, passed down through generations of their family. But the foundation of it all, the heart of it all, would always be the love between a mail-order husband who was 15 years older and a rancher's daughter who had known exactly what she wanted and had been brave enough to reach for it. Floyd lived to be 82, passing peacefully in his sleep in the fall of 1924. Caroline held his hand as he took his last breath, her heart breaking even as she felt grateful for every single day they had shared. She lived another 8 years, remaining active and engaged with the ranch and her family until her own death in 1932 at the age of 73. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the Circle W, beneath the vast Arizona sky they had both loved. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued to work the ranch, carrying on the legacy that Floyd and Caroline had built together. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set and painted the desert in shades of gold and orange, the family would sometimes gather on the porch of the old ranch house and tell stories about the mail-order husband and the rancher's daughter who had built an empire on love, hard work, and an unwavering faith in each other. The Circle W thrived for generations, a testament to the vision and dedication of its founders. Charlie's descendants continued to run the cattle operation with the same care and attention to detail that Floyd and Caroline had instilled in him. Samuel's horse breeding program became renowned throughout the Southwest, producing some of the finest working horses in the territory and later the state when Arizona achieved statehood in 1912. Francis's business innovations kept the ranch profitable even during the difficult years of the Great Depression. But more than the land or the cattle or the horses, what Floyd and Caroline left behind was a legacy of love. They had shown their children and their children's children that true partnership meant respecting each other's strengths, supporting each other's dreams, and facing life's challenges together. They had proven that love could grow and flourish even in the harshest conditions, that an unexpected beginning could lead to the most beautiful ending, and that age was no barrier when two hearts were meant to be together. In the ranch house, carefully preserved in a frame, was the telegram that had started it all. Marriage arrangement accepted. Arrive Kingman, Arizona, October 15th. Floyd Ashford. Beneath it, in Floyd's careful handwriting, was a note he had written on their 25th anniversary. I answered an advertisement looking for a practical arrangement and found the love of my life. The 15 years between us became nothing compared to the lifetime we built together. My only regret is that I have just one life to spend with you. F.A. And beneath that, in Caroline's equally careful script, I placed an advertisement looking for help with a ranch and found a partner for my soul. You were 15 years older, and I said I liked a man who knows himself. What I found was so much more. A man who knew how to love, how to listen, how to build a life worth living. Every day with you was a gift. CWA. These words, preserved for future generations, told the story better than any history book could. They spoke of two people who had taken a chance on each other, who had chosen to see possibility instead of obstacles, who had built something lasting and beautiful in the wild, unforgiving landscape of the Arizona Territory. The sun set over the Circle W as it had done thousands of times before, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures. The horses moved gracefully in their corrals. The great-great-grandchildren of Floyd and Caroline played in the yard where their ancestors had played before them. And if you listened carefully on those quiet evenings, you might almost hear the echo of two voices from the porch, talking and laughing and planning for the future, bound together by a love that had transcended time and age and every obstacle life had placed in their path. This was the legacy of the Circle W. This was the story of Floyd and Caroline. This was the proof that sometimes the best things in life come from taking a chance, from looking past surface differences to see the heart beneath, from saying yes to possibility even when it comes in an unexpected package. Floyd had been 15 years older, and Caroline had said, "Good, I like a man who knows himself." In those words was the seed of everything that followed: a thriving ranch, a loving family, a partnership that lasted a lifetime, and a love story that would be told for generations to come. And so the Circle W continued, season after season, year after year, generation after generation, standing as a monument to what two people could build when they trusted each other, respected each other, and loved each other with all their hearts. The Wild West might have been tamed, the frontier might have closed, but the spirit of Floyd and Caroline lived on in every sunset over the Arizona desert, in every calf born in the spring, in every family gathering on the old ranch porch. Their story was one of courage and determination, of hard work and dedication, but most of all, it was a story of love, pure and simple and true. Love that grew from respect, that deepened with time, that weathered every storm and emerged stronger on the other side. Love that proved age was just a number when two hearts beat as one. This was the story of the Circle W. This was the story of Floyd and Caroline. And it was a story with the happiest of endings, for they had found everything they had ever wanted and more in each other, and they had built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The end.